Today's Velshi Band Book Club feature, The Last White Man by Mohsin Hamid, leaves a lot unnamed. We don't know where the surrealist novel is set. No town or country is ever disclosed. And we never discover what is causing every single white person to wake up one morning with inexplicably darker skin. Quote, one morning, Anders, a white man, woke up to find he had turned a deep and undeniable brown, end quote. We do get two names. Anders, our protagonist, who works at a gym and tends to his dying father, and Una, his yoga teacher girlfriend with a racist mother. Anders and Una's relationship, from dating to marriage and eventual parenthood, functions as a vehicle to explore what happens when whiteness just disappears. Written in Hamid's trademark long prose and poetic language, The Last White Man is first and foremost a meditation on structural racism. This magic darkness, as the book describes it, is symbolic. It isn't depicted as any race. It's not a book propelled by action, moments of unrest, death, and violence. There is unrest led by militants, but it feels distant from our protagonists. And consequences of a racist society are quickly forced into a reckoning. The result is successful, but quiet. For some, or at least for me, some of the strongest moments in The Last White Man are between Anders and his ailing father. Hamid captures the nuance of loss, of love, of the futility of chronic illness, and of the dynamic between a child and a parent. Quote, standing was hard enough, and he ignored his pain, for it was part of him now, constant, not remotely bearable, but also not avoidable, and so put up with a nasty sibling, end quote. Anders' father is the titular last white man to go through the unexplained change from white to brown. The Last White Man exists in a long tradition of movies and literature that play with the concept of changing race or identity, from Franz Kafka's classic Metamorphosis to Matt Ruff's 2016 Lovecraft Country. This is well-trod territory, which makes it all the more surprising that The Last White Man, a fresh take on this idea, caused such a firestorm after its initial publication in 2022. It even found itself right smack in the middle of a Tucker Carlson segment on Fox News.
What is this?
Right. Well, it's a new phenomenon that goes just beyond books, but I think it's important to actually do an overview of The Last White Man. Basically, the characters suffer through these apocalyptic changes as violence escalates as whites disappear. Pale-skinned militants in woodland camos stalk the streets, attacking people with impunity from the cops. But a calm settles upon the world once whites disappear from its face forever. A book like this, which is somewhere between racial exterminationist literature with a kind of wistful touch and liberal pornography, could only be written about one group, and that privilege is reserved for whites.
This novel, any novel that explores and grapples with racism and racist structures through surrealist motifs, is not racial extremism or liberal pornography. It's a critical view of our society and one of the few ways to begin to enact change and spur empathy. The Last White Man is a quick read. It's only 180 pages. You can read it in an afternoon, although if Tucker and his guest bothered to read it, they certainly did not take the time to try to understand it. Today's meeting of the Velshi Band Book Club is officially underway. I'm joined now by Mohsin Hamid, the award-winning author of 5 novels, including today's feature, The Last White Man. Mohsin, welcome to the Velshi Band Book Club.
Thank you.
I want to start with an author's note that was included in my copy of The Last White Man. It reads in part, quote, this novel's beginnings can be traced back to September 11th, 2001. After that day, many things changed for me. I was 30 then and had lived 18 years in the West. I had always been a brown man with a Muslim name. That had not changed, and yet something had changed. It took some time for me to understand what it was. I had lost my whiteness, end quote. Now, of course, this idea of whiteness is the central theme of your book. Tell me a bit about how this relates to you.
So around 9/11, I was living in New York. I'd been to these elite universities in the U.S. I had a well-paying job. And, of course, I've encountered discrimination, but I wouldn't say it was a major factor in my life. And after 9/11, I suddenly noticed that people were looking at me differently. I was getting stopped at the airport, pulled off flights, and people would get up on the subway and change seats. Suddenly, this idea of who I was had changed, although I hadn't changed. And I think that notion of being somehow not quite just a person had a huge impact on me. And I think in a certain sense, whiteness is about just being a person in a society like the US. And the loss of whiteness is no longer just being a person, but being something else, something other.
Talk to me about your use of surrealism and why you use it so much in your writing in general, including in The Last White Man, to tell this story.
So I think that what's happening is what we call reality isn't entirely real. The further science goes, the more we realize that we are kind of inventing reality. The color blue isn't blue, it's light being reflected at a particular wavelength off of an object and our brain saying that this is blue. And similarly, who we are is a story we tell about ourselves. Our race is something that we imagine into existence. And so what playing with reality in a novel allows us to do is to sort of tweak those rules, to see what would happen if we imagine things differently.
I want to describe the language in the book. White and whiteness are used throughout the book, but never other labels about color, like black, for instance. Tell me about that.
So I think that, in a sense, whiteness was invented up until some centuries ago. People belonged to a particular tribe or their particular group, their ethnicity. But the idea of a kind of European whiteness really comes to us from the Reconquista of Spain, when Muslims are pushed out of Spain and reconquest of Spain by Christians happened, and people trying to figure out, well, what if you're pretending to be a Christian? What if you have, deep down some Muslim or Jewish, background? And they come up with this notion that, well, if you are descended from Africa 2-3 generations, perhaps you're not really Spanish, not really one of us. And this notion is invented, and then colonialism starts and whiteness goes with it. So I think, in a sense, the invention of whiteness is the beginning. And the other races, of course, are then invented to be in opposition to whiteness.
Una and Anders eventually have a daughter who doesn't remember anyone ever being white and only hears stories about whiteness from her grandmother. I'm going to read a quote from the book. It says, "The years went by swiftly for Anders and Una, more and more swiftly, as they do for all of us. And while memories of whiteness receded, memories of whiteness lingered too. When their daughter arrived and grew fast, too fast, into a woman, they wanted to give her things from before, her inheritance. And they spoke of whiteness then and what it had been," end quote. Talk to me about ending the book on the next generation.
So I think that the way the world changes often isn't that necessarily we are transformed as individuals. Our ways of seeing things are transformed. We do change over the course of our lives. But the big way in which human society changes is that, old people die and young people grew up. And as these young people grow up, they have different views. And so Anders and Una's daughter is growing up in a world where you are unable to tell what race somebody is by looking at them. Everybody is some shade of brown. And growing up like that, she isn't burdened, in a sense, by the concept of race that we have today. And for me, I think, race is something we've invented into existence. It has a terrible power. But we can also, because we've imagined it into existence, imagine it out of existence. And I think that future generations probably will.
I want to talk about Una's racist mother. Before she turns brown, you write, quote, "Una's mother was active online and listened to the radio and watched the news, and she had come to believe that she was on the inside among the elect. Those who understood the plot, her daughter said was ridiculous, the plot that had been building for years, for decades, maybe for centuries, the plot against their kind," end quote. This feels like it could be written about a lot of people absolutely today.
Absolutely. We are living in a moment where human culture and machine culture are merging. And machine culture is a culture of sorting. Are you like me or not like me? Are you like this or not like this? And as we become more immersed in social media and other forms of machine culture, we are ourselves becoming obsessed with sorting. What is my kind? Are you like me? What is happening to my kind? Are we under threat? And because we're told that we're under threat, and because we privilege information about threats, we've, in a sense, all around the world, whether in Russia or Pakistan or in the US, we've come to believe that our group does face some enormous threat and that we must save it.
I touched on the controversy surrounding this book, played a little bit, something I don't typically do, of Tucker Carlson's segment that described the book as anti-white or racist. What was the word he used? Extermination, something about exterminating white people and liberal pornography. I don't typically get too far into how authors react to this stuff because it's all the same nonsense. But that's pretty extreme. They had some choice words for your book.
Well, I don't think they read it. I mean, the book is about four white characters who think of themselves as white, and none of them is killed. There's no extermination. It's not about the death of white people. It's about people turning brown and being unable to be recognized as white, to be seen in a racial way. Now, that in a sense might feel to some people like an extermination. And I think that so many of us are grappling with the loss of pillars of our identity, whether that's faith, whether that's religion, whether that's whiteness. And as we get older and we see these pillars begin to disappear or begin to become shaky, it can feel to us like a personal extermination, but it isn't. In fact, it's the way of things. Human beings do lose things. We lose everything by the end of it. And what the novel is about is trying to dignify that sense of loss without giving dignity necessarily to the thing that's being lost. That Una's mother can feel powerfully that she's losing something. And we can feel for her feeling that without necessarily feeling that the thing that she's lost is something that must be preserved.
Giving dignity to the sense of loss without dignifying the thing that is being lost. What a remarkable sentiment. Mohsin, thank you so much for joining us. Mohsin Hamid is an award-winning author of today's Velshi Band Book Club feature, The Last White Man.